Jamie Carragher trying to tear down Manchester United again with Jonny Evans in the studio. Now, it's funny. It is funny, as everyone's pointing out, that Carragher's been away, missed the overlap after United beat Liverpool, missed or hasn't had this opportunity to kind of dig into Manchester United too much over the last few weeks. I think he did do a bit on Monday Night Football after the win at Anfield that United got, and I think he was relatively complimentary, but he went along the lines of saying, well, they can't play like this all the time, can they? And we know that, Jamie. We do know that. This is a work in progress, and where we are at the moment, like I say, United are not too far off second place. Where are they? 1 point off third, 2 points off second after 10 match rounds. And yes, as somebody pointed out to me in the Twitter comments as well, they're also 2 points off 11th. So are everybody else, pretty much. You can see that they're just in this mix. And part of my shtick over the last few weeks, and maybe it's not shtick, but like what I've been trying to get across is, as long as United are in this group of teams and not falling away from it, knowing that they don't have Europe to contend with, and going into like a relatively kind run of fixtures over the turn of the year. They've already played all of the big six, and Spurs will be the last one this weekend to play them. Hopefully United can start building up a head of steam, but they just need to be in the conversation. They're 8th in the league, I think, at the moment. And that position will yo-yo because all the teams in the mix are really, really close together, and one result can change your position by a few places. And that's just the way that it is. You can't judge the Premier League table at the moment on position. Just look at the points, look at the form, and look at signs that United are getting better. And I think we're starting to see them. The Forest game, from what I see and understand, caused meltdown to a degree among a lot of the fan base. I didn't actually catch much of it because I wasn't actually on social media at the time. I was watching it in the TalkSport studio at the building, and obviously was focused on the game at the time because I was live while I was watching it. You can go and check that out. I did share the clip on my social media as well. My raw thoughts and reaction were over there for this time, but obviously I like to come back on the pod and be a little bit more measured. I thought I was quite measured there too, but yeah, go check that out. But anyway, I've gone off piste a little bit. I thought it was really interesting that Jamie Carragher chose this opportunity to, again, get his point across about the system that he thinks is never going to work for Manchester United, that betrays, essentially, the history of Manchester United. They need flying wingers, and he made one comparison to, well, George Best used to be in the left wing position, Ryan Giggs used to be in the left wing position, now you got Diogo Dalot up there. It's not good, is it? Well, Jonny Evans, I think Jonny Evans soon put him in his place. I thought it was a really, really quite funny way that all went around. Not obviously intending to be, but just the way that Jonny Evans like straight batted everything. I thought it was quite interesting. But look, obviously Carragher's going to get pelters because he's not been too complimentary or like doing all this deep dive analysis on United after they've been winning games, and now the moment they drop points, he's back doing it again and like picking holes. Look, I think Jonny Evans is in the studio. Why? I'm not entirely sure, but Jonny Evans is in the studio, and I'm sure that the guys at Sky and Carragher have taken the opportunity to talk to Evans about the system because Evans is there. And it would be foolish not to, really. I think Jamie Carragher has his own thoughts and opinions about the system, and it was, for me, a good opportunity to ask Jonny Evans about how it works. And he definitely tried. He definitely tried to do that as well. But I thought it was it was pretty painful at times to watch Carragher trying to get his points across like he's been trying to do the whole time. But I thought it really put Evans in quite a difficult position. But I thought the way that he dealt with it really was quite good, quite respectable. But of course, like I said earlier on, he is an employee of Manchester United at the moment and played in the squad last season and played in Ruben Amorim's system last season. So what does he really expect? Is he going to, if Carragher's coming out and saying, well, this system doesn't work, Johnny, does it? Is Jonny Evans going to go and say no? Well, probably not, because he's an employee of Manchester United. But I thought the one moment in it in particular, or two moments in it in particular, just really creased me. So he's been talking about this central centre-back stepping up all this time. into midfield and like was asking like, Johnny, did you play there? Why does that happen? And he essentially said, well, it's to make a back four, basically, and give the goalkeeper more room to distribute the ball. So he just moves one player instead of moving 5 players. So he lets that central centre back go into midfield, and then the 2 wider centre backs become the actual centre backs, and the wing backs become full backs. And that's basically it. To save you moving 5 players around into different positions, you just move one. That's it. And whether that's the actual intention of it or not, I don't entirely know. But I thought it was quite funny. I got to say, Jonny Evans came across and he didn't straight batted it, didn't give too much away at all. If there is a deeper meaning behind it, then would it be wise for Jonny Evans to give that away? I don't know. I don't really recall Ruben Amorim explaining it in too much detail. It's very... United have to protect themselves. You don't want to give away secrets of this Ruben Amorim system or the reasons why they do it, or like where players move in certain situations, because it does help other teams like spot those issues, especially if you're getting a player who used to play for Manchester United that is currently employed by Manchester United in a non-playing capacity. If he's talking about it and undoing his team to the nation on television, it's not the smartest thing to do, is it? So I feel a little bit for Jonny Evans having to deal with that, but I'm sure he knew what kind of atmosphere he was going to get into. He did bat off the agenda quite well. And there was another point as well that, as I was talking about just now, the comparison between like Diogo Dalot at left wing back and Ryan Giggs and George Best. Well, it's because he was going on a lot about the wing backs as well and talking about how they're maybe not the right fits and not the right answers. And Ahmad obviously gets criticism over the weekend for, well, not criticism, maybe it's the system and not the player himself, but there's some criticism because Ahmad is not a fullback or a wing back, and you can potentially expose a defensive frailty there, as Morgan Gibbs-White did in that Nottingham Forest game. You can potentially expose a frailty there because Ahmad is more diminutive, right? He's not exactly a powerhouse in the air, and that's maybe an opportunity. You can throw the ball to the back post and maybe get ahead of him and try and knock the ball in, and that's exactly what happened to get the game back to 1-1. But that's risk reward, I think, and obviously that's been talked about over the last few days. Carragher was obviously talking about like, well, this system doesn't really work, does it? Because you're putting square pegs in round holes in a sense. But we know that the square pegs are in round holes at the moment because United can't address those positions in the transfer market all at once. And that's what I've been trying to explain on the podcast as well over the last few months. You have to be patient with this, but you need to see signs of progress. And now that United have got a few results, I think everybody's a little bit more tolerant, a little bit more patient. And obviously they're in the conversation as well. Everyone's a bit more tolerant and patient of what this could become in the end. And Jonny Evans essentially was asked about those players being in those positions, and he did essentially point to the fact that this is probably a personnel issue. And maybe in 2 years' time, this isn't necessarily going to be the personnel that are playing in these positions. But the important thing to do first for Ruben Amorim is install the system to make sure that everybody understands what their job is. There was a really interesting, actually, this is going remotely off topic. I'm changing clubs here. Really interesting conversation that Sky did with Antoine Semenyo over the weekend as well. Having a storming season, plays for Bournemouth. And he was asked about what Andoli Iraola wants. What's the main thing that he wants you to do? And this is the social clip that I saw. Didn't watch the whole interview, but I thought the bits that I did see of it were really interesting. He just wants you to run. Just wants you to run. Every single person in the team needs to run. And I think it's been out there as well that everybody has to do the same job. Everybody has to muck in. Everybody has to know their role. Everybody has to give the same physical output and give everything that they can to the team. There's no exceptions, no matter who the player is. And Semenyo is probably Bournemouth's most high-profile player, and he knows that that's the case as well. I think for what it's worth, I think he'd make a great fit at United, and I hope they can start to explore that down the line. It costs a lot of money though, but it's so important that any manager who is going to have a foothold or grab a foothold on the team and make that team his own, it's important that he has ground rules. And that's why over the past year, it's been just over a year now and nearly a year since Ruben Amorim actually took his post at United. I think it's the 11th of November. So important that a coach like that sticks to his principles and sticks to his guns and doesn't make concessions. I know that there's people who have wanted him to make concessions to bend to the players' abilities and will, I suppose. But the way that I see it and the way that I have seen it this whole time is for Manchester United to move forward, a manager needs to have that power where no player is bigger than the squad, the system, the team. And look, it works for Bournemouth. I know they got smashed by Man City at the weekend playing a high line, and I thought was quite naive. But the only way that I think United are going to get moving forward and get out of this consistent mess of sacking managers every couple of years is by standing by their principles and setting ground rules. And Ruben Amorim has done that probably better, maybe not better, probably more strongly than anybody before him over the past 10 or 12 years. Even though results have been going against him, he is stuck to his guns and he has changed things within the system, but it's really important that that happens. And that's why these wing backs, even though they're not perfect fits at the moment, Dalot specifically, even though they're not perfect fits, the ground rules have to be set. The players have to understand the system. And then if you can add to the system, United have signed 2 number 10s. I think they're looking really good. Sesko, we'll talk about him a little bit later on. But you can see the pieces of the puzzle coming together. Midfield, I'm sure, is next. Wing back, I'm sure, is next. There's probably going to be more defenders as well. This will take time, but I think what Amorim's trying to do is set ground rules and make every single player in that squad understand that this is what is needed out of this role, this role, this role, this role, and this is what it does for the team. So eventually, when new players join in, everybody knows what the plan is and how these players get the best out of this system. So there's no changing and then changing back and changing back. It's all smooth. And we won't see the full benefit of it for a couple of years, I'm sure. But that's kind of what I wanted to say on that entire section. I did go off piste a little bit again there in terms of what I was talking about, bringing in that Semenyo interview. But I think that well-run football clubs have that real clear direction. And United have lacked it for a long time. And as painful as it's been, that's the best thing. And yes, look, when I look at Diogo Dalot, I don't think he's the perfect fit for left wing back. Don't think United really have one at the moment. Maybe they even need to sign one, but that's just something that I know will come down the line, and I'm being patient with it. But look, there's more to focus on as well. Fantastic work from Jamie Carragher and fantastic work from Jonny Evans as well to bat off all those questions. Why he's there, I'm not entirely sure, but for what it's worth, I think he did well to not give away too much on TV and to make Carragher look a little bit silly. I quite enjoyed it. So what else have we got then in the media takes another swipe at United conversation that we're having today? I'll be back, I'm sure, to talk about actual things involving Manchester United. But now it's more about the focus of or the noise around Manchester United. I think more people are becoming, well, lots of people are becoming a hell of a lot more savvy to how obvious this is and are calling it out more. It's quite good, actually. So I'll maybe talk about Gary Neville and Benjamin Sesko to end the show, but for now, I'll address this piece that The Athletic have put forward. I think it was the Nottingham Forest writer at The Athletic that put this out. The Athletic's focus on the ball going out or whether it didn't. So the social media post said, VAR could have corrected Manchester United's controversial corner quickly. A minimum of 28 cameras are utilised within a full video assistant referee setup in the Premier League. At many clubs, the number can be even higher. Semi-automated technology can now decide in moments whether a player has strayed offside. Why are they not being utilised to make other factual, straightforward decisions? We are not talking about the murkily grey area of whether there's been sufficient contact in the area to merit a penalty or whether a player has held onto another player's shirt for a nanosecond too long. There's no subjectivity involved here. It's black and white. Has the ball gone out or not? And everybody's lost their mind about the ball going out. I, watching it live, thought that it was out. I did tweet it's out with a grab of the image while I was doing like a live video as well. Since I've looked back at it, it's probably not out. I've got to say it's probably not out, but it's just funny to kind of keep that there to wind people up a little bit. But look, I think there's two parts to this. You got to understand really that Manchester United are the biggest club in England and one of the biggest clubs in the world. And I've said this numerous times. If you say something positive about Manchester United fans will read it. If you say something negative about Manchester United fans will read it. So will everybody else. That's kind of the way that I feel like all the media is going. It's incredibly difficult. Now that United are in a better moment and haven't lost in 4 games, only 4. Now that they're in a better moment, it's easier to call it out and back up United rather than fall into the trap of thinking that everything is terrible at United because they're not getting results. Look, this one, I'm not surprised that it came out, but I think everybody's right, really. And I have been calling this out as well on the last episode. It is completely right to question why this is written and not address the fact that Benjamin Sesko had a shot which was deflected over for a corner, which wasn't given as a corner. And then Forest went down the other end literally a minute later and had a shot which deflected off their own player, but was also given a corner. That's 2 decisions there that went against United. I didn't even really talk about, like on last week's episode, I didn't talk about the Ahmad penalty at all because I just don't feel as though this is the best use of my time, really. But I know I'm talking about for 30 odd minutes probably of this episode today. I'm talking about the media focus on United and how it's all completely skewed to a negative direction. I think that's just the way that it is. I'm kind of used to it, having worked in it for a long time. I was never directing the way that things went. I was never actually pushing that because I had a proper issue with it. But like after I moved positions and that kind of thing, and responsibility was given to different people, I even started noticing it at the place that I worked as well. It just happens. That is the way that you maximize traffic. That is the way that everybody gets eyeballs on a story. Like you even see with transfer news, and it's been happening for years. A player could move to a club 5 years after Manchester United were linked with the player once, and Manchester United still put in the headline, still put in the story because it makes it relevant to United and it makes it read more by a hell of a lot more people. It's just the way that it is. I think that's the way that the scene goes. And not many people are going with it at the moment. As much as that ball maybe wasn't out in the end, it is real double standards, really. And like I think it's important that maybe me talking about it on my small podcast or like people in the space who are much bigger, it's important that that's called out to try and balance out the nonsense coverage around Manchester United because like it can still be quite impressionable on people. But I know on this podcast over the past year or so, I've been really trying to balance out. There's been so much negative on United over the past year that I've been here, maybe sometimes on my own, not on my own, but trying to balance out and give the positive side of things and give the patient side of things that perspective to come across to balance out the conversation, because I think that's really important. People need to think differently. And at the moment, I think we're just in a spot where everybody's a bit sick of it. I've been sick of it before, but now sometimes I just ignore it, really, even though I'm not currently ignoring it and making an episode on the podcast and on YouTube about this. But I just find it easier to just ignore it and not complain about it, really. But I'm just more pointing out the fact that this is happening, and I think people should continue to call it out for what it is. I think that's probably the best way to go. Or ignore it. Ignore it. Maybe they won't do it anymore. Anyway, Gary Neville and Benjamin Sesko has been getting some headlines as well. So he was speaking on his, I think it's NBC, right, on his panel show or coverage around the football. And he says, I'm no further forward on Benjamin Sesko. The jury is still out. He's miles off it compared to other forwards United brought in, like Cunha and Mbumo. He looks awkward. His touch was off a few times when balls went over the top. For 80 million, yes, he's young and still settling, but you want to see something more. And I just thought, get your facts right, Gary, to start with. Gary Neville is quite negative on United a lot of the time. He really is. And I was surprised to actually see that he'd said this again. Like there was, in the win over Brighton as well, he was quite down on Sesko, and Sesko had for me, done quite well in the game. I think there was a goal that he set up for Brian Mbumo as well. But Neville came away from it thinking that he wasn't the right fit, or that he was, as he said here, miles off it and not bringing other players into play and not being part of the game. Now, Sesko didn't have his best game at Forest. Absolutely not. I think there was a shot that he snatched at, which went hit the side netting, and for most of the time he was more kind of anonymous. But I think the way that he's framed this again, it just seems as though I've made the comparison to Højlund quite a lot because of the age thing and because of the lack of experience thing. I think, for what it's worth, I think Sesko has already shown me a hell of a lot more than Højlund did in terms of build up play and hold up play and bringing other players into the game. I quite like him, and I think he will do quite well, but I'd score goals over the next few years. But you can't realistically expect this guy to come in and be as good as Cunha and Mbumo already. I think it's really poor. It's another 22-year-old kid who is having to deal with the pressure of leading the line for Manchester United, getting called out by a Manchester United legend. It's not for me. And he's miles off it compared to the other forwards United brought in, like Cunha and Mbumo. Well, of course he is. Cunha and Mbumo were bought for lots of money because they were ready-made players in the Premier League and have been there before and have shown that they can excel in the Premier League. That's why United made a big deal about signing them. United weighed up whether to go for Ollie Watkins in the summer because he was Premier League proven as well. Instead, they've gone with Sesko. For me, I think I'm quite impressed with what I've seen from him so far. It's completely unrealistic to expect that he's going to hit the ground running and do Erling Haaland numbers straight away, because Erling Haaland is an absolute monster and has set standards in the Premier League for goal scoring for strikers which are just unreachable. He's an absolute freak, by the way. In a nice way. I actually really like watching Haaland, just even though he plays for City. And his YouTube channel is quite funny as well. But look, he looks awkward. His touch was off a few times when balls went over the top, and they did. That was the case. I think there was one moment where Mbumo from the left side switched the ball in, and it was absolutely perfect to Sesko, and he kind of took a touch on it. He was in behind the defender, but the touch was heavy, and it went through the goalkeeper. Now, that is true, but you've got to bring some balance. Unless, of course, you don't have to bring balance, and what these guys are looking for is, again, social media shares and big sound bites and that kind of thing. That's just the way that it is. But to get the price wrong as well, it's just, again, piling unnecessary pressure, I think, on a striker in a relatively good moment for United. The weekend was not as bad as I've seen that some people have been making out. Again, you need to judge this period that Manchester United are in on the actual period, not one game or two games. I think if you get an idea that United have got a run of games coming up now, which is a lot kinder to them. Some difficult games in there, of course, and they're not going to win every single game. I can pretty much guarantee that. But as long as the trend is moving in the right direction, as long as United are picking up wins and showing signs of improvements, I think that should be enough for everybody, really. And like I say, where are they? 2 points off second, 1 point off third after 10 match rounds. And they're in 8th place in the league. Every single person would have taken that at the start of the season. Every single person who follows United would have taken that at the start of the season, comparing it to last. Everyone. So now that United have grabbed results out of this first 10 games, which puts them in the mix and puts them in the conversation, you can start to believe a little bit more. Before, it was, we haven't seen anything, so we can't really believe in it, even though Ruben Amorim was coming out and saying, I think we played better against Arsenal. They lost the game. You can't really defend it, and I understand why. But now that United are getting results and are 4 unbeaten, I think the Tottenham game's a big one. I've got to be honest. I will learn a hell of a lot about United in that game, I think, and whether they have moved on, especially if Tottenham play the way that they've been playing over the past few weeks, at home anyway. 3 wins at home this year, I think. Crazy. But yeah, it's important to kind of keep perspective and understand that this is a long-term process. This is a long-term plan. Again, United's plan is to be challenging for the league in 2028. I'll say this numerous times. For what it's worth at the moment, I think the fact that they're in the conversation is improvement. They're not going to go and win every single game and be in title races or whatever. I think United are, in terms of the quality in this squad, in this mix, in this conversation. And I think they should be in this mix and conversation for the entirety of the season as well. Because, again, they don't have Europe and 9 teams do. And there's plenty of time to perfect this system and get it right. The personnel needs to change at some point, maybe in January, maybe in the summer. More changes will be made. But just keep the long-term vision in mind. And all this noise I've talked about on the podcast today, laugh it off or ignore it completely or call it out, whichever one you want to do. That's my approach to it anyway. Please subscribe to the podcast if you've not done so already. Like, subscribe, and 5-star review. That is all I would really appreciate you doing. Please drop a comment as well, Apple, Google, Spotify, and on YouTube as well. Let me know what you think about anything that I've talked about in the podcast today. Let me know anything you want me to talk about in the podcast in the future as well. I'd really appreciate that. Always open to ideas. Follow me on social at @Scott Saunders as well, and get in touch with me on social. Now, I've been going on for about 30 minutes or so I'll let you get on with your day. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, but Media Machine will keep spinning and trying to put Manchester United down. Just block it out. That's my thought process. See you next time, everyone.